My case study was done on a male that was born at 37 weeks gestation. His parents are cohabitating, but they are not married, and there is a history of violence in the home. The biological dad is both verbally and physically abusive to the mother. The mother did not report to the police because she's not sure how she'll survive without his financial contributions. And the mother has very limited support as both of her parents have died when she was in her teen years. She has been with the father since she was 17 and she is now 23, and the father is now involved in selling drugs. So first, Nora is the mom, and she's a 23-year-old woman who becomes pregnant unexpectedly. When Jake, her boyfriend, finds out she's pregnant, he pressures Nora to get an abortion. And at first, Nora agrees to abortion because she has many worries about how she's going to raise a child. One of these worries include bringing a baby into a home where there is the physical and verbal abuse, as the dad is abusive. She also has limited support, as it was mentioned, because her parents passed away. Nora thinks through her decision very carefully, and then she decides in the end that she will not have an abortion, that she will keep the baby. Around 32 weeks, she starts experiencing severe sciatic pain, and Jake convinces Nora to take some Vicodin pills. And she justifies it by saying that the baby's body is already developed and it shouldn't harm him. She goes into labor at 37 weeks, and they have one of Jake's drug customers driving them to the hospital because they do not have a car that is working at the time. And they have the baby boy Silas, who needs to stay in the NICU for a week due to weak lungs and then also withdrawals from Vicodin. CPS does get involved, but after an investigation, they decide that Nora can take Silas home, but there will be drug tests weekly on a bi-weekly basis. And the social worker at the hospital asks Nora if she has any needs, and she mentions she doesn't know much about raising babies and that their car tire is popped. So the social worker refers Nora to an agency called Hope Unexpected. It's an organization that loves on women and children, and they help meet their needs, bridge the gap to self-sufficiency, and show them the love of Jesus. Nora is relieved to hear about Hope Unexpected, and it's within walking distance of their house. So she'll be able to gain knowledge about raising an infant and then also get her car fixed. Then they are discharged from the hospital, and Nora attends Hope Unexpected almost weekly. They are able to support her as she's still getting physically and verbally abused by Jake. Meanwhile, Silas is thriving due to Nora's care, and even though he was born addicted to Vicodin, he hits all of his milestones and thrives. At his 4-month checkup, Nora is able to make that one after not making any other appointments because of their car. So she finally makes an appointment and is able to go to it at 4 months, and the doctor says that Silas is developing right on track at that appointment. As he continues to grow in toddlerhood and early childhood, Nora does have to have her urine tested for drugs, but after a year, CPS closes the investigation. And Silas continues to hit his milestones on time. And when he's 2, he hits all the skills that he should, including scribbling, drawing on a paper in a circle, and standing on his tiptoes. There is a lot of tension in the home, and Nora shields Silas from that as much as she can. She's the one that takes the brunt of the abuse. Jake, the dad, is indifferent to Silas and does not really interact with him much unless they are customers over, and then he kind of uses him to brag about what a great dad he is. At the age of 2.5, Silas spikes a fever, and Nora is not concerned at first, but after a few days, Silas is not getting any better, and Jake convinces her to give him aspirin. And after a little bit, Nora is monitoring Silas, and he turns lethargic and starts throwing up, so she brings him to the emergency room. And the emergency room finds that Silas has Reye syndrome, which is a rare condition that causes swelling in the liver and the brain, and it often affects children and teenagers recovering from a viral infection. There is a link to aspirin use in children during flu or chickenpox. And Nora feels terrible about this because he does have swelling on the brain due to Reye's, but he is much improved after a few days thanks to Nora seeking medical attention early on. After 5 days, the doctor tells Nora that Silas is improved enough that they can go home. And the doctor does notice that Silas's hearing at that time seems to be not within a normal range, so he tells her to follow up on it. As they come home from the hospital, Nora walks in and Jake is with another woman. And after that time, Jake starts to verbally and physically abuse both Nora and Silas. Nora is shocked because he has never abused Silas before. So she puts on a brave face for a few days, and she talks to her mentor at Hope Unexpected and asks her if there's any sort of resource in the area to leave someone who is abusing another person. And so Nora keeps a low profile until she goes to a meeting on a Monday night where actually she is brought to a shelter by someone named Jill. The shelter is called Resilience, and it provides emergency shelter and then also long-term housing for women who are being abused. So the plan goes as well as it could, given the circumstances. And at the shelter, a lady named Ginny sets them in for the night, and she also helps Nora start applying for jobs. Nora finds a job at a daycare where she can bring Silas and not pay for care. They also get a new phone, set up a bank account, set up a budget, and Ginny also sets up counseling both for Nora and Silas. So Nora and Silas love the daycare and they make good friends there. And one of Nora's friends is another classroom teacher named Becca. And Becca gently encourages Nora to get Silas's hearing checked. So she does take him to an ENT and finds out he does have hearing loss and he needs to wear hearing aids because he has about 40% hearing loss. During this time, Silas does continue to grow well, but he does attend speech therapy from the age of 3 to 4, and he makes great progress. But besides that, he's hitting all of his milestones at the same time as his peers. Moving on to middle childhood, they both continue to thrive, and their support systems are the shelter, Resilience, and Nora's coworkers. After an extended time at Resilience, Nora and Ginny sit down to assess Nora's budget, and Ginny mentions that she thinks that Nora can pay for a small apartment. So Nora finds an apartment that's in a good location, and it's within a bus line and walking distance to the school that Silas is now or will be attending. He's now in all-day kindergarten, and then he goes to an after-school program at the daycare where Nora works. In the early winter of Silas's kindergarten year, Nora starts to deal with depression and anxiety. Moving out on her own has taken a toll on her emotional state. So for 2 weeks, she's unable to get out of bed and she's really struggling. She finally heads back to work after 2 weeks and she realizes that they do not have food. So through talking to a coworker, actually they go to dinner at a coworker's house who helps support them, and then when Nora goes home that evening, she hops online and she finds a program called Gleaners. And Gleaners is hosted one time a month on a Wednesday evening, and they provide food for dinner that night, and then they also provide groceries for the week. So this program just helps bridge the gap between when she gets her paychecks. A volunteer named Ben helps Nora get home with her groceries that night. And while on the way home, Ben mentions to Nora that he has a car to sell. So he sells it to her for cheap. And Nora starts attending that church called Engedi Church and eventually starts dating Ben. They date for a few years and then they decide to marry. And then Nora and Silas move into Ben's home in Holland, which is only a few miles away from their apartment. Silas loves Ben in the presence of an adult male. He even calls him dad. And they continue to bond as a family unit. When Silas turns 13, there is a shocking phone call. And as we move into adolescent stage, we are going to pick up when Silas gets a phone call from his dad, Jake. Jake has turned his life around. He hasn't sold drugs in years. He has been through anger management class, and he married 2 years ago, named to a woman, Rose, and they have a baby on the way. So that baby on the way has prompted him to realize how much he's missed out on Silas's life. So he asked Nora if it's okay for him to be more involved with Silas's life. And Nora tells Jake that she does need to check with Silas since he's 13. Silas agrees, and through a trial period, they find that everything is going well, that Jake is a positive influence in his life, and they don't go through the courts, they just set up some visitation together. So that goes well. Silas is generally well behaved, but he does receive a gaming console when he is about 16. He is friends with a teen named Will, and they spend a lot of time together playing video games and hanging out. But Silas starts to withdraw, stay up late till 2 or 3 in the morning. He's sullen, and he does not interact with them. And one day, Nora gets a phone call from the high school saying that Silas was caught entering the girls' locker room trying to take photos of girls. When Silas has a meeting with the principal, he mentions that when he's on those gaming systems, or that gaming program, he was encouraged to, or he was exposed to pornography and encouraged to take photos of girls. So he is referred to a place in the area called Winning at Home. It's a local counseling office, and that's a condition to being allowed back into school. So he sees a counselor there, and he connects with him so well that he ends up seeing him even after the 2 months that school requests that he sees him. Silas continues to go through ups and downs that adolescents bring, but he starts to engage more with Nora and Ben, and he eventually graduates high school. Through the course of that year, he decides he would like to be an electrician, and he goes to a local community college and goes to classes there for that and earns a certification. And then he finds an apprenticeship at a small company. During this time, Will and Silas still stay in contact, and they hang out almost every week. Will has also gone into a trade, so that works out well. Moving into young adulthood, Silas finds fulfillment in his work as an electrician. Him and Will go dancing at a bar that has line dancing, and Silas meets a young lady named Lydia. She ends up pregnant, and they go to an agency called Positive Options in Michigan, or Holland, Michigan. They offer options for women such as providing ultrasounds, and then they also walk alongside men. So it's a great option for them to receive some support. Silas is drinking at this time, but Lydia puts up with it. And one night on the way home from the bar, Will gets into a car accident. So through the course of this, Lydia takes care of Silas. And Silas sees what a good mom Lydia would be and agrees to keep the baby. Once he is rehabilitated, he makes the decision not to drink anymore. And he ends up moving in with Lydia. And they decide to keep the baby. And they have a baby named Jack. And after a year, they decide to get married, and then they have 2 more children, Ivy and Violet. Silas continues on as an electrician, and Lydia is a photographer, and they're able to even put a down payment on a house that's near Nora and Ben. After a number of years, he feels like something's missing from his life, so they decide to attend church, and they all develop a relationship with God and the church community. And then during that time, Silas is also getting into the environmental justice movement because he realizes how important the earth is and he wants to take care of it. The kids continue to grow, and they do typical family things like vacations, cheering each other on at sports, and date nights. And Silas eventually starts his own company, and he decides that when he's 65, he will sell it. So we're moving into a late adulthood, so Silas makes good on his promise that when he's 65, he will sell his company. 1 year after that, his dad Jake passes away from heart disease, his stepmom moves to Florida, his stepdad Ben passes away from cancer, and his mom is moved into a dementia facility. So he is very much in that sandwich generation where he's taking care of both his kids and his parents as he takes care of his mom. He's under so much stress that his health starts to deteriorate, and he has a stroke 9 months into selling his business. So he was able to get to the hospital quickly, and after a few months of rehab, after the stroke, Silas is almost functioning back to normal as he was before the stroke. After a few months of selling his company, his mom, her health deteriorates, and she unfortunately passes away. So all of these changes are very hard on Silas, and he goes through depression, trying to figure out who he is again. He meets with a counselor grudgingly, but this counselor suggests to find a hobby that he enjoys. So him and Lydia pick up pickleball and spend more time traveling. Silas also decides to spend more time with his kids and grandkids, and then he really plays an active role in his community as kind of like a local handyman where he just helps out his neighbors. He lives until the age of 84, and then he passes away in his sleep. So even though he had many risk factors that could have turned his life in the wrong direction, he had protective factors such as social support, a great relationship with his mom, and support for early learning and good emotional self-regulation. We're going to talk about his dimensions really quick. Biological, his body was impacted in many ways. When he was born early at 37 weeks he was addicted to Vicodin and with weak lungs. So this impacted his body short term. He also went through Ray's syndrome, swelling in the brain, and had to wear a hearing aid. He goes through the normal phases of biological development, such as puberty at the appropriate time. As he progresses into late adulthood, he does have a stroke and his body declines due to stress, but after rehab, his health is steady until he passes away. Psychological, when he is young, Silas experiences separation anxiety from his mom. He also goes through periods of depression, withdrawal, and faces peer pressure. As he enters late adulthood, he also faces depression, lack of purpose, and grief. So counselors help through those different times. Spiritual dimension, Silas's spiritual dimension is impacted for the first time in middle childhood when Nora goes to Gleaners, and through the course of his life, he does become an active church member and has a solid relationship with God. As we progress into culture, when his mom was pregnant with him as a young lady in an abusive relationship, she has to decide if she's getting an abortion. So Silas's very life is impacted by culture because she grew up in a household that abortion was not a choice, so she decided to raise Silas. As Silas grows, they need to redefine what culture means as his mom marries his stepdad, and then as he marries, he has to figure out what the culture of his family will be. Physical environment. Silas's physical environment started out in a house that is a drug den. It progresses into a shelter, apartments, a house with his stepdad, Ben. So he has a lot of different physical environments that he has gone through. When he moves into the house with Ben, there's a neighborhood that has grass, trees, parks, and then he raises his kids in a very similar environment. Dyads, there are many dyads that play an important role in Silas's life, and the first one is his mom, Nora. She is his provider, protector, and friend. Silas also is impacted by his stepdad, Ben, so that's another important dyad. He now is a father figure to Silas. And then additionally, Lydia is a very important dyad in his life because he's the one that spends the rest of his life with. Families, he has to redefine family many times through the course of his life because he is first born to two unwed parents, then his mom remarries, then he actually steps into a family with Lydia, and then I forgot to mention he also has a family with his dad Jake, stepmom Rose, and their daughter. Small groups, a small group that impacts Silas's life is the friendship of his friend Will. They're both in the trades and they share the experience of going through high school together. Another group of, a small group that impacts Silas's life are some couples that they travel with. Formal organizations, these are organizations that impact Silas's life. Hope Unexpected and Resilience, they both helped Nora and his mom when they lacked a support system. So those were two great organizations that helped, and then also a place called Winning at Home that was a counseling office. Communities, they are part of many communities. They find community at the shelter that they flee to. They also find community at Engedi Church where they share faith ties. And then when he retires, he bonds with many people in his physical community. Social structures and social institutions. At the beginning of his life, Silas falls into lower class, and his mom improves their lives, and they would be considered upper lower class. Then when his mom gets married to Ben, they're in upper middle class. And then when Silas starts off in middle lower class when he first gets a job, but moves into upper middle class once he owns his own company. Social institutions that play a role in Silas's life are things such as a hospital. He is in the hospital many times when he's born, when he's in a car accident, and then due to Reye syndrome. Social movements, Silas's mom, Nora, was impacted by the Right to Life movement. So once again, that was an impact on his very life, but then he also got involved with the social justice movement when he is a little bit older. Linear time, Silas's life was impacted by linear time because there was a small amount of time of his life that always be his past. This is the amount of time where he lived with his dad, Jake, in the drug den. And so he looks at his past to see where he came from, and he is proud that all that he has accomplished despite these humble beginnings. When he is married with young kids, he looks forward to them growing up so he can take them fun places and explore with them. Historical era, he lives through many historical eras. He's born in the 1960s, so he's seen many discrete blocks of time in human history. He's lived through eras of many wars, saw 9/11 happened, retired in 2020. He lived until 2040, so 2020 to 2044 was his retirement era. And then chronological age, we follow Silas from the age of 0 to 84. He was born in 1960 and lived until 2044. As he ages, we see his chronological age rise, and he faces new challenges in each stage. So that is a recap of my case study.